tried to clarify his remarks, you accept that Ken Clarke does view all rape as serious.
Well, he's gone some way to making rectitude for the mistakes and the comments that he's made, but I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is that to make a distinction, for the Justice Secretary to seek to make a distinction between different kinds of rape is very unhelpful. There's still a long way to go until women feel confident reporting rape and until we see the prosecution.
Farage's dangerous game, when political opportunism meets public health. Right. Before we dive into today's absolute shambles, smash that subscribe button because what I'm about to tell you will make your blood boil. And trust me, you'll want to be here for every single expose we drop on this channel. Welcome back to UK Connors, where we cut through the Westminster waffle and serve you the unvarnished truth. Now then, let's talk about Nigel Farage and his latest spectacular failure to do the bare minimum of responsible leadership. Picture this. You're a pregnant woman dealing with morning sickness, back pain, the whole 9 yards, and your doctor recommends paracetamol for relief. Standard practice, right? Well, apparently not if you're living in Farage's fever dream of political opportunism, where even basic medical advice becomes collateral damage in his desperate scramble for relevance. Bridget Phillipson, Education Secretary and Labour Deputy Leadership Candidate, has just delivered what can only be described as a masterclass in calling out political cowardice. She's accused Farage of endangering women's health by refusing to condemn Donald Trump's absolutely balmy claims that paracetamol during pregnancy causes autism. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not talking about some obscure policy debate here. We're talking about a man who could potentially influence government policy staying silent while dangerous medical misinformation spreads like wildfire. Phillipson didn't mince her words, and frankly, why should she? I couldn't have got through my second pregnancy without taking paracetamol, she said, and to scaremonger in that way, and to scare women and put lives at risk, I think is really dangerous. This isn't just political point scoring. This is about real women making real decisions about their health based on advice from actual medical professionals, not some conspiracy theory peddled by politicians with questionable motives. But here's where it gets even more sinister. This isn't an isolated incident. Reform UK has been giving platforms to medical conspiracy theorists left, right, and centre. They platformed a cardiologist who suggested the COVID vaccine was linked to King Charles's cancer. Yes, you heard that right. They are using the monarch's health struggles to push anti-vaccine nonsense. The audacity is breathtaking, but the implications are terrifying. Think about the pattern emerging here. Farage's outfit isn't just dabbling in medical misinformation. They are systematically undermining trust in established medical practice. Phillipson hit the nail on the head when she said, "Vaccinations have saved the lives of millions of people. They are prepared to go to those fringes, and we've got to be firm as a party in taking them on." Now, you might be wondering why this matters beyond the obvious public health concerns. Well, buckle up, because this is where Farage's strategy gets truly calculating. He's not just spreading misinformation, he's weaponizing women's health and safety for political gain. Throughout the summer protests, we saw reform supporters using women's safety as a cudgel against migration, positioning themselves at the forefront of demonstrations outside asylum hotels. Phillipson called this out with surgical precision. What victims don't need is people seeking to make political opportunism out of their suffering. She's absolutely right. When genuine concerns about violence against women get hijacked by political opportunists, it doesn't make women safer. It makes the issue of political football while real victims suffer in silence. Let's examine Farage's latest policy gem, shall we? His plan to scrap indefinite leave to remain, replacing it with rolling visas tied to high salary thresholds. Phillipson described this as frankly disgusting, and she's not wrong. This isn't just immigration policy. It's a deliberate attempt to rip families apart and rip communities apart. We're talking about people who've built their lives here, contributed to our society, suddenly living under the constant threat of deportation based on arbitrary income requirements. But here's what's truly insidious about Farage's approach. He's mastered the art of appearing reasonable while peddling extremism. He presents these policies wrapped in the language of common sense and fiscal responsibility. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find the same old divisive rhetoric designed to other entire communities. Phillipson's frustration is palpable, and frankly, it should be. She's openly admitted there's been frustration within Labour that they haven't come out fighting quickly enough against reform's controversial announcements. "We do have to be firmer in our approach," she said, And about bloody time, too. The British public doesn't need politicians who tiptoe around extremism. They need leaders who will call it out for what it is. The timing of these revelations couldn't be more significant. Phillipson is currently battling it out with Lucy Powell for the Labour deputy leadership, and both are making the case that Labour needs to be more aggressive in taking on reform. Powell herself admitted Labour was struggling with authenticity and attention and warned they risk losing support by taking progressive voters for granted while failing to articulate a clear and compelling argument to those flirting with Farage. Powell didn't hold back either, describing Farage's immigration plans as a scheme cooked up by a man who was a love child of Margaret Thatcher and Enoch Powell. Brutal, but effective. This is a kind of language that cuts through the Westminster bubble and actually resonates with voters who are tired of mealy-mouthed political responses to extremism. What's particularly telling is how Phillipson has positioned herself in this deputy leadership race. Despite being painted as the establishment candidate, she's pushing back hard against that characterization. It's a funny old world to be apparently the establishment candidate, given how much of a kicking I've taken from the establishment in recent months, she said, referring to criticism over her education reforms. She's not wrong. Being in cabinet doesn't automatically make you establishment if you're willing to rock the boat. The education brief brings its own challenges, particularly around SEND reform. Critics have raised concerns about spiraling costs and inadequate support, with some suggesting the system is being taken advantage of. But Phillipson is determined not to let this become another culture war battleground. She's particularly scathing about reform figures who dismiss children with additional needs as simply badly behaved or blame poor parenting. This isn't just policy disagreement, it's basic human decency. What strikes me most about Phillipson's approach is her willingness to make moral arguments rather than just technical ones. She's not just saying Farage's policies won't work, she's saying they are fundamentally wrong. That's the kind of clear moral leadership British politics desperately needs right now. The endorsements from GMB and Unison suggest the unions recognize this too. They are backing someone who's willing to take the fight to reform rather than hoping they'll simply fade away. Because let's be honest, Farage isn't going anywhere, and his influence is only growing. The question is whether Labour will rise to meet that challenge or continue to hope that reasonable discourse will somehow prevail against calculated extremism. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Farage's success isn't accidental. He has tapped into real frustrations and legitimate concerns, then twisted them into weapons against vulnerable communities. His refusal to condemn Trump's paracetamol claims isn't ignorance, it's strategy. By staying silent, he gets a benefit from conspiracy theorist support while maintaining plausible deniability. This is a politics of the lowest common denominator, where truth becomes negotiable and public health becomes collateral damage. When politicians prioritize their political positioning over pregnant women's well-being, we've crossed a line that should never have been approached, let alone crossed. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about the next election cycle. We're talking about the kind of country Britain becomes. Do we accept a political culture where medical misinformation gets a platform, where women's safety becomes a political weapon, where established communities live in fear of arbitrary deportation? Or do we demand better from our politicians and our political discourse? Phillipson's challenge to her own party is clear. Stop being reactive and start being proactive. Stop hoping that reasoned argument will somehow triumph over calculated divisiveness. The British public deserves politicians who will stand up to extremism, not accommodate it in the name of political civility. The deputy leadership race is about more than internal Labour politics. It's about setting the tone for how the opposition responds to reform's growing influence. Will they treat Farage as a legitimate political opponent deserving respect, or will they recognize him for what he is, a dangerous opportunist willing to sacrifice public health and community cohesion for political gain? As we watch this battle unfold, remember that these aren't abstract political debates. They're about real women afraid to take pain relief during pregnancy, real families living under the threat of separation, real communities being torn apart by divisive rhetoric. The politicians who will inherit this mess need to understand that their words have consequences far beyond Westminster. So there you have it, Farage's dangerous game laid bare. A man so desperate for political relevance that he'll stay silent while pregnant women are terrorized by medical misinformation. A party so committed to division that they'll platform conspiracy theorists and exploit genuine tragedies for political gain. and a political system that's finally waking up to the realization that reasonable people can't remain reasonable in the face of calculated unreasonableness. The question now is whether Labour will seize this moment to draw clear lines in the sand, or whether they'll continue to hope that somehow reasonable discourse will prevail against organized extremism. Based on what we've heard from Phillipson and Powell, it seems like the fight back might finally be beginning. If you want to stay ahead of the political curve and understand what's really happening behind the Westminster spin, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because trust me, this story is far from over, and you'll want to be here for every twist and turn. Until next time, this is UK Connors, keeping you connected to the truth.